this one. You're giving me attention. I think they're making me lose, and I really need those, and I beat that one by one.
So welcome to another episode of the Pepe Soup Talk Show, where we bring to the table movers and shakers in the African diaspora. My name is Aki. I'm here with my partner, Toby. And our two special guests with us today, Chika and Cierrah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. They come to us with a wealth of experience in the education space, and they also do some other things too. Chika is an early childhood education specialist. She's also a digital marketer, an entrepreneur. She actually spent a lot of time in China. She lived in China for some years, which her... Both of y'all lived in China.
Yeah.
Okay, we definitely want to get into that. I feel like China's just been in the conversation a lot these days.
Yeah.
And so she began a startup while she was in China called What's Good Beijing.
Mm-hmm.
What's Good Beijing. So we definitely want to hear more about that. And before coming back to the U.S. and continuing in education advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cierrah is a education consultant. She started in the classroom, and now she's outside the classroom in education consulting. And we want to learn more about what you're doing on that front. You went to you graduated at Villanova and Columbia, which is super dope. And so we are thrilled to have you guys on the show today. And just to get right into it, bon appetit.
Yeah, I'm ready to eat. Okay.
You're super hungry.
I'm starving.
And
I'm hungry.
Welcome to the Pepe Soup Talk Show, Chika and Cierrah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, let me not delay you. Like, you want to taste a bite? Take a
I
bite.
do. Wait. You guys want to cheer though?
Oh,
Yes.
I guess with the ball.
Yeah. It's liquid. That's all that matters. Cheers to trying new things.
Cheers.
That's nice.
Bubbles.
That actually was nice. I've never tried that.
It's gonna be too spicy for me.
I've been training her.
Not too bad. Not too spicy. Not too bad. It's
Well, yeah,
definitely
nice.
flavorful.
Well, it's really nice.
The Nigerian pepper soup.
Let's not start fighting. We all one jollof. We're all one pepe soup. We're all one, right?
It's so funny.
Did
I
you
don't
try
know
it?
the difference between the Nigerian before.
I mean, it's just soup. We have ensala soup, which is very similar, liquidy, has fish, very hot, and very good. And that's checking all the boxes. So shout out Liberia.
Definitely got my spice talent substance mean.
Yeah.
Definitely shout out to Liberia.
No, for sure. This is really good.
So I could do a brief intro, go more into my background a little bit.
Mm.
I'm from Philly. Like I said, that's I think pretty much a big part of my background. I've been here for a while. I went to Villanova. And a part of that was definitely being close to home, plus just like people said Villanova was a great school with being from Philly. So I went there. And it was a good experience. I met some of my really close friends, like friends that I still have now at Villanova. And it's cool being able to like go back sometimes. Like we've been doing some stuff with the alumni network, doing some volunteer events. And that's been cool. After Villanova, I actually moved to DC, and that's where we met.
Yeah.
What year were you at Villanova? What year?
From 09 to 13.
Okay, so we're the same year. Yeah. Were you 09 also? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Were you how big is Villanova?
I would say it's like mid-sized. It's definitely not small.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say mid-sized. Yeah, on the lower end of mid. It's not super big. You definitely can meet people.
Yeah.
And like connect with people. It's not too big. Like you're not gonna have huge lecture halls all the time. I was
trying to remember who from my high school went to Villanova. I can't remember at the moment.
Are you from Philly too?
I'm from New York.
Okay.
I'm from New York, but I definitely had some people. I went to a big high school, Universal High School. So we had 4,000 people at my high school.
Oh,
Were you graduating class or you?
My,
Can you
well, my
imagine?
graduating class was like about 1,000.
Wow, that's a lot. That's big.
Yeah, yeah, and it was big. It was big.
Yeah, mine was like
It was a few hundred in my graduating class.
mine 163 in my graduating class.
163.
Yeah,
Mm.
really small.
That's Ohio. In Ohio.
In Ohio, yeah.
Okay.
There weren't that many like really big schools. Most of them are smaller.
Yeah, we had a few hundred. I went to Girls High here in Philly.
Okay.
And I would say that that's not the biggest high school. Maybe a couple hundred in our graduating class. But yeah, so definitely Philly, born and raised. But after Philly, went to DC to teach.
Yeah.
I actually thought I wanted to be a lawyer in undergrad, and then I worked at a law firm, and I was like, wow, this is so boring. I have no desire to do this for a long time. And I had to think about like, what do I want to do next? And education had always been really important to me and really critical in my life in terms of my success. So and I had tutored in high school. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll go the like education route, but I didn't have any background in it. And luckily, you know, I was able to join Teach for America, which helps people with, you know, just education, like a degree, go into the classroom if they have, you know, a passion for that. So I did Teach for America, and that is where I met Chika.
Gotcha.
Yes. I feel like I had a different route to TFA than Cierrah. I think I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and my parents are Nigerian immigrants. And so we grew up, I have 7 siblings, so a really big family. And we grew up in like a Black neighborhood, but kind of went to private parochial schools, so largely white schools growing up. And we were like a low income family. And I felt like it was just so weird to like drive 12 minutes away from your house and go to like a whole new world where your neighborhood looked different, the schools looked different, like the people looked different. And it was literally 12 minutes away. So that kind of put me in a space of like trying to compromise and just meld the two worlds together. And luckily I had the support of my siblings because my family largely integrated our elementary school, which is crazy. Like in the 90s, it's like a Ruby Bridges moment. Insane. But so you're kind of this foreign family in this white neighborhood. And of course, you know, what comes with that, a lot of racism. And so that experience made school kind of tough for all of us. And so we were, as a family unit, very much leaned on each other. And in our culture, our parents were also our teachers, our first teachers. And so we did a lot of extra school, after school, on the weekends, summer school, they were our teachers. And so education was just such a big deal in our family. Of course, you know that the African families be really hard on the going to school. So for me, like, I'm a free spirit, super creative kid, like just all over the place. And I always struggle with figuring out like why school, like what I'm just doing what I'm told. And I didn't really understand why. I didn't understand like what the connection was. And so like, I was kind of moving through the motions for most of my education experience, just trying to survive. And then somewhere through high school, I happened into starting to volunteering to prepare for college. And so I was volunteering with at-risk youth in my neighborhood. And they were in my neighborhood. They were of my experience.
This is high school.
Yeah, this is in high school. And that's where I kind of, similar to Cierrah tutoring, fell in love with the kids. But then also wanted to explore and leave Ohio, since it was a very small place. So I moved to Boston, went to Boston University and studied international relations and Chinese. Because during that experience, I had happened upon, I don't know if you've heard of the show, but like Sagwa on PBS. It's a Siamese cat. Like it's this cartoon.
I feel like I know that cat.
It's like I'm not even gonna say but it is an old. My parents, like they only let us watch PBS, like just like that.
Wow.
Only that. If we could even watch TV. So
sounds like some Nigerian household.
It's so crazy.
Yes.
We can only watch. Was this all through high school? Or just,
yeah, pretty much. They were really strict with.
So I went through a period of time where we could only watch the Discovery Channel or Animal Planet.
Oh wow!
We
But I wasn't all through high school.
I would have been watching that because I love animals, but no, it was literally if it's not on PBS, you're not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were lucky to catch Dragon Ball Z. And so the show has this cat, and at the end of it, they show you a Chinese word, right? And I had never seen it before, like ever. So I asked my mom, who I think knows everything. I'm like, Mom, what's that?
Yeah.
She's like, I don't know. I said, I don't know. I'm like, this is the first time your parent says I don't know. For me, they're like know-it-all. So I'm like, oh, let me learn that because it's something you don't know. And so I started just kind of trying to learn Chinese, and then that's kind of what guided me on that path to study it in college. And
so when you say you started to learn Chinese, and back then, I mean, you're in high school.
Yeah.
YouTube wasn't even around yet, right?
Middle school / high school. Yeah. I was like going to the library.
Okay.
I started to ask my mom just like, where could I get classes? So through the church, she found somebody who, like, people who are growing up as Chinese people, sometimes they may go to Chinese school to learn Chinese if they're in America. So I went to Chinese school with like other people that were trying to learn Chinese in like a neighborhood, like a neighborhood outside of where I was from, on Sundays. So after church, my mom would drive me to Chinese school, and I'd be the only little Black girl.
That's available.
It was amazing. It wasn't in my area. It was like very, because that's where the Worthington is where it was, and that's where a large Asian population. So just because you know somebody who knows somebody, it was really great that existed for me to kind of go. And so then from there, once I got to high school, I started looking for like programs. I don't know, Harvard had a summer program, so I did summer school at Harvard for like just learning more Chinese, or just trying to find all of those opportunities.
In college,
in high school, I did it in high school. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just to keep exploring and because I think the energy for me was like, get out. I'm trying to get out of my neighborhood, trying to get out the state. Like, and some parents will, some
country
parents,
too.
right? Just like, go, how far can I go? Like, if the world is flat, like, am I gonna? But I definitely was like, just trying to get out. And I think my parents encouraged that. They were like, by 18, I don't want to see you in my house. Like, you got out. They have 8 kids, so you can imagine how many years they poured into us. So they were ready. And I'm lucky number 7, so I'm on the younger end of the spectrum. So they was just tired by the time that we got there. And so I left and used that as a vehicle. So when I was in college, I was doing the whole international relations and lots of politics and advocacy.
Yeah.
But then still had education in the back of my mind. So I was tutoring, I became a nanny. I was working with a lot of different types of students. And I think when graduation hit, I just felt like something's pulling me into the classroom. And I think I realized, since I had never had a teacher of color in my life till that point, I was like, why not be the one? And TFA.
Well, by the way, shout out to your parents for having persistence with discipline, because the fact that you can only watch PBS,
right,
and you were the 7th child, I feel like usually by then they're probably just like,
you know what? It's the pedagogy of the oppressed over here.
Usually get the freedom by that point. Like,
my siblings definitely also were the ones that upheld a lot of the rules that my parents had, because they weren't always there. They're working, they're out and about. So my siblings certainly were the disciplinarians. So like my older sister is 4 years older than me, was like almost worse than my mom. Love you though, girl. But she was a serious disciplinarian.
Oh man.
Jeez.
Okay.
One question, with I guess year or time that your folks come over here. 90s, 80s?
Great question. So I grew up with like older parents. So my parents actually came over here in the 60s.
Oh, the 60s.
Yeah. So my parents are Dad's turning 80 this year. Big deal. My mom's in her 70s. So they were of the pre-Biafra era. So before colonization, before we were free, 1960. My parents were there. So Dad was born in 1943 and my mom was born in 1950.
Wow.
So before. So definitely literally during colonialism. And so they didn't leave Nigeria until their 20s or so. My mom did go to boarding school, but largely they didn't exit until the war. So the 60s.
Have you had conversations with them about what it was like, going through this, the war, but even like the fact that it was pre-bathroom war, so it's like, that's two whole completely different Nigerias, like before and after,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. It's tough though, because I think that like my parents are, because they're older, they're of that silent generation.
Yeah.
And so they don't talk that much.
Yeah.
And luckily, I don't care. I'm still gonna ask you a bunch of questions. And I've been pestering, because when you're a younger when you're a child with older parents, like dad's in his 50s when I was born, my mom's in her mid 40s when I was born, right? Your idea is, oh, I'm not sure how much time I have, right, with my family. So mortality was definitely a big piece in my upbringing. My parents also largely were sick for a good majority of my childhood. So it was just a lot about thinking, are they still going to be here? And so I really focused a lot of my time on understanding them, hearing their stories, trying to figure out the family tree, because it was largely confusing because there are no records, right? There's no ancestry.com. I can like. And so I think a lot of it is just trying to piece together their choppy stories that they tell you off whim. Wake up on a Saturday morning, hey Ma, tell me about Grandpa and his merchanting business. Like, and she'll tell you the story different every single time. So you have to then start being like, what are the consistent details? So for me, I get a sense of what it was like, but there's still so many missing pieces. But my parents had different experiences because they both also grew up largely wealthy.
Okay.
And so that I think also
in Nigeria.
Yeah. So my father's father.
Just a side note. Before Nigeria broke away from Britain, the naira, since we're colonized, was the same weight.
That's like the pound.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
That's real.
Yeah. So compared to that, and now the naira's gone to, I mean, like does, but not that's better some countries. That's why it's like wealthy then versus now.
I actually remember I have an uncle who I had dinner with him. This was a few years ago. And he's telling me about how when he came to the U.S. for the first time, that the naira was 1 naira was equal to $7 back then. And so it's crazy to think like now, because I don't know what the exchange rate is now.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Was that 400?
Yeah, 400 naira.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. So they basically, my parents were wealthy, and so their experiences were very much different. And by getting cars when they're like, I got a Mercedes. And, you know, my mom's father was the police commissioner of the Anambra state in Nigeria. Okay. So just very high caliber people, and it was wonderful. Love it as part of my ancestry, but they didn't understand, I guess, our experience of not growing up with any money and them growing up with money. So they just didn't understand what we were going through sometimes. And so it certainly was a challenge to try and just understand my parents and have them understand us. But I try and talk to them about their past as much as possible, but as they get older, it can get a little foggy. But certainly a different experience. Prior to, I know my mom told me a funny story where during the war, she has 5 siblings, and she's the oldest, and they had to dress up the boys as girls to avoid them getting conscripted into the army at that time. So then the army comes to the door, they're knocking, and my uncle has a dress on, I guess. And just the thing that's funny but terrible at the same time. Like, or, you know, my mother's father, Michael Ibekwe, he was imprisoned during that time because he was part of the police force. Yeah. So like my father's father was a merchant. So he had a merchanting business called Erico that was kind of multinational. So between London and Nigeria, he was shipping things. And during that time, all of his things were seized, and his boats and things like that. So the war did impact my family, but how much so, I don't know if I'll have all the pieces.
Wow. I remember, when you talk about I remember reading, was it Things Fall Apart? Things Fall Apart.
One of my favorites.
And when you're as you're talking, because it sounds like you're reading a book. It's like you're speaking a book, you know, because it's like these is real stories, like
real stories. I think we had that conversation the other day, just particularly just that Black people around the world, like we carry so much history in our DNA, right, in our beings. And so just striking up a random conversation with any person, a Black person from across the world, you'll probably feel like it's a movie. For sure.
It's real people's lives.
It is. But I remember reading that book and just trying and being really frustrated. Like, I think that story, and I'm not finished of the trilogy. I've only read the first 2 books, but yeah,
I didn't know that actually. I didn't know that either.
It's 3 across generations. It maps Okonkwo's story across several generations. And I just remember feeling so angry. Like I couldn't, some days I just had to put the book down because I just was trembling with just the frustration about like how somebody out of nowhere could come into just imagine someone coming into your home being like, I don't like how your rug look. I don't like how this look. Take that out. That don't make sense. Why are your chairs like this? Like, and destroying everything like in your home. And I think that piece really, it sticks with me till today of just people not accepting that our culture, our beliefs are valid, are real, are worth respecting rather than erasing.
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
For sure.
I see some parallels, but
go ahead. So I think the earliest, from at least my experience, the folks that came in, maybe the earliest 70s. And I feel like at least your parents coming in the 60s must be really lonely, because I feel like the most migration of Nigerians to the US was like in the 90s, 2000s. And that's where, we set up hubs. But, across, I guess, tribes or ethnicities, I don't know what's the correct terms. A lot of parents will be like, you got to know the language. Even though we're Nigerian, you got to know. When I die, what you're going to tell your kids? You're going to talk to them to English in my grave or something like that?
So I guess Chinese,
no,
right?
they totally did the opposite.
Really?
My family, my siblings and I are all to this day mad at our parents for just dropping the ball on teaching us Igbo. And I think that for them, I think they used Igbo as a way to talk about things they didn't want us to hear. And so it ended up, they used it as a tool to keep secrets, I guess, or just to not stress their kids out about certain things, I suppose. But small things, I guess I got a few words in me, but nothing. And largely, and I think I used to feel really bad about that. And I know that I meet Nigerians and they're, whether continental Nigerian, diasporic Nigerian, either way, it would always come up, be like, "Do you speak the language?" Like, da-da-da. And I'm like, no, but that doesn't, I think I learned through my process of discovery that shouldn't change, and that doesn't shake my identity as African, as a Nigerian, just because I don't speak mother tongue when the national language of Nigeria is technically English. So I don't feel as stressed out about that. And but it is certainly was something I wish that my parents did. So I've been trying to learn the alphabet and start learning some small Igbo words, but it's a process.
Yeah, true. I was wondering. I only asked because if it was my parents, they're like, trying to learn Chinese, you can't speak Yoruba.
That's the crazy part. If you that would be the mindset. And then they would be offended, like, you worry about China. What about your own country? Right? And that wasn't the case. I think my parents have done a really good job just supporting the things that we're passionate about. But we have to show true dedication if they're going to get on board, because of course, like in our culture, there is a very rigid path, right? My mom is a pharmacist, and she never got to choose her profession. Her father said, "You're a pharmacist," and that was it, right? And my dad had a different story. He, got to be a musician. He had a jazz band, and it had a different trajectory. But then when he met my mom, was like, "Get a real job." So he became an accountant. In the end. But so the path can be a little rigid. So you really, if you're trying to go off the beaten path, you really have to prove that you're gonna be okay.
Yeah, true.
And just my last question on this topic, is just something we'll be talking about amongst ourselves and Sekou, in terms of, you mentioned identity as a Nigerian. So I guess you were born in the 90s in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. I've never been there, so I'm not sure what the Nigerian community.
I would suggest to go though.
Who's in Columbus? I feel like who's from Columbus?
Bow Wow. Yeah.
That's not who I was thinking about. But...
He forgot. He's not thinking about it either. He forgot. Shout out Bow Wow.
Wait, is Dave Chappelle from?
He lives in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, that's close by.
And like a creep, I've driven by his house. Shout out Dave Chappelle.
So in terms of identity as a Nigerian, the '90s, there was a few of us. Now Nigeria's worldwide.
Yo, we up.
Yeah.
So how's the, I guess, coming into, I'm not sure if it's identity or identifying with the culture, the process, being from Columbus to now. So I'm not sure if there was African stores in Columbus and the things like that. I know in the major cities on the East Coast, you see Nigerians everywhere.
Yeah.
And we have like shops wherever you want to go. But
yeah. I mean, I feel like my mom got like an African radar. Like she gonna know if you in the radius, a 50-mile radius, she gonna know. She's the queen of network. So like everything I know about networking and just schmoozing, I learned from my mom. And she has such a beautiful network she created on her own from the muscle of Africans across the state of Ohio. And whether it's family or not family, for me, my concept was, doesn't matter if you're blood related or not, it's aunties, uncles, and the like. So she found a lot of aunties and uncles that really all supported us, and having our family in Nigeria sending us spices. If you want it, obono, you don't have it at the store, you can send it from Nigeria. Right. But there were a few African stores that were available for us. We did have to drive a little bit to get to them, but a mixture of people sending us stuff, my mom knowing some people, and the few stores we had all the African food we could desire for sure. But to answer your question about the identity piece, I think it was really hard. I think I was trying to meld two identities. I'm a Black American and very much proud in that identity because I grew up here in America, but I also am very proud Nigerian. And I think sometimes people can't always wrap around loving both things and being proud of both things. But it did take me some time to not feel shame about not being the most African or not being the most Black American. But for me, it's I'm me, and my me is a mixture of those two cultures. And I spend a lot of time making sure I'm intentional about being deeply involved. I got 5 toes in one and 5 toes in the other, but either way, I'm 10 toes. So I think now traveling and getting to know and building my own network from my mom's example of other Africans that I know and my own family has allowed me to really just fully realize my identity as a Nigerian woman, a Nigerian queer woman, just all the identities swirling into one.
Have you been to Nigeria?
Yeah, once, twice. Once that I don't remember because I was a baby. Funny story, my mom, I guess, wasn't able to come back with me because they thought that she stole me while in Nigeria. So it was crazy. They had to keep me there. They had to send my birth certificate to prove that I was her daughter. So my mom is a beautiful dark-skinned woman.
How did that happen that they thought that?
Because my mom is beautifully dark-skinned, but I was a lighter baby because my father's quite light in his complexion. And so I was quite light at that time. Crazy. And they thought that they just said she stole me or something. And it was just
people stealing babies a lot at that time?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that's the thing. Like, human trafficking is a thing, for sure. Oh, for sure. But that was the first time, technically. But then in 2016, I went back. Actually, that I can remember, my cousins were getting their titles in the village, and I was able to go and just do the whole shebang for about a month. And yeah,
do y'all have things in Igbo land?
Yeah, we do, but it was. I can't remember the name because for my mom it's the Odu title, but for men it's another name. But they got their titles at that time, and so most of our family was able to go back, and I got to see Onitsha, and we drove up to Wari, and we were in Lagos, and it was really nice to just see all of the family that I've spoken to on the phone, heard about, my mom talking about. So it was a really transformative experience for me, and I loved the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly being that we had to get our passports. And so we were at the place you get your passports sitting outside in the sun for like hours and hours and hours and hours.
Wow.
It was a great experience, and I can't wait to go back.
So now, you said that y'all met in DC.
Yeah.
During Teach for America.
Mm-hmm.
And
we were roommates.
And your roommates.
Yes.
Oh, wow. How did y'all meet? Like,
because you know what I'm gonna say. She don't think it's wrong.
She always tells people that we met online, and I think that
because low-key we did.
I think that's misleading. Generally, when people say, "Oh, we met online," it makes it feel like it's like a dating
harmony.
Right, but we met on.
You can find love on Facebook.
you know,
I know Facebook's got the dating thing now.
what?
Like,
Do they?
Facebook dating, I think.
For real?
I'm not.
I think
I'm
surprised.
cracking
I,
up.
I hadn't heard about that.
It comes up on my like my feed sometimes. Like,
Facebook trying to send you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
You picking up what Facebook put?
Exactly.
it's that direct algorithm.
It's about that time.
They even Facebook on my ass now. So good.
But with TFA, like they make just like high schools or colleges, you know, they make groups for the different cohorts.
Mhm.
And so we were both in the TFA cohort for 2014.
Yeah.
And we were looking for roommates because we were both moving from different places. So we connected in that group to be roommates, and then we met in person in DC. And we were just like roommates for like the first year or so after we met.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, as they say.
And here we are.
you guys are engaged now,
Yeah.
right? You're saying, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
on that.
Thank you. We've been engaged for a little bit.
A long time.
Yeah.
Really.
It's like 2018. It's been a while for sure. So, but largely because, you know, being a lesbian couple and having Nigerian parents don't mix very well. So I think that caused a little bit of
a delay.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic and then the delay.
We were also in China during that time. Then the pandemic happened. So it's been like one thing after another. But
what year was China?
2017 to 2021.
For her.
2017. Okay. Okay.
And the first few years that she was in China, I was in New York. I was in Brooklyn when I was going to grad school.
Yeah. So you bring up a point about being a lesbian couple, because I feel like Nigerian culture and African culture in general, but things are changing a little bit, but can be very homophobic. So for you as a queer Nigerian woman, how has that been for you as far as like your family and just like kind of navigating the world?
Yeah, I think you know what, I think I'll start by saying that the most important thing I think in life is empathy, because it just helps you maintain a healthy perspective no matter what the situation is. And so I knew I was queer for a really long time, since I was like middle school. And I know my parents, we went to church almost 3 times on Sunday. I went to Catholic school since I was in pre-K. Like we were in church all the time, like church down. And my mom, it's praise songs, it's gospel, it's constant praising. And I think that I knew what type of environment I was in, and it wasn't necessarily a welcoming environment with someone with my identity, but I think it really was important for me to move with empathy so that I didn't feel constantly under attack. Yeah. Even though I low-key was, but I needed to feel like I could understand what was happening. So I understand how my parents could have that mindset, right? They were born, it messes with my mind. Like 1943, when my dad was born, was also nearing the end of World War II. Right. 1945 was the true close. Like Americans are going into Germany. Like that is the world that my father was born into, right? And we know what Nigeria's been through, Africa's been through post-imperialism, right? So the world that they know is so far from the world that I know. And I really try to respect that when I think about how my identity is in direct opposition with theirs. Yeah. And so that really helped me throughout my childhood, because of course I'm going to go to church 3 times on Sunday and hear being gay is bad over and over and over again, right? And I hear it in my home, right? My mom will say some things, and my neighborhood, which was largely a low-income Black neighborhood that is transitioned and gentrified to a white neighborhood, had the influx of gay white people coming into our neighborhood, and my mom reacting to having Jeff and Jeff as our neighbors, right? And hearing the things that she would say. So for me, really tried to keep it all in perspective so I didn't lose myself. But it was definitely super difficult to feel like, I almost felt like I couldn't say a piece of myself. I was always a little bit lying, and I don't like to be in that space. I'm a very open, transparent person. And so that was hard. But I think it got to a point where, when you have a ring on your finger, you can't really hide it anymore. Because and funny enough, like in our culture, you're not bringing any romantic person home unless it is like unless it's that point. And so when that point came, I felt like, oh sheesh, it's time, right? And 2 years prior to us getting engaged, I had already come out to my siblings. Yes. So I'd already told them, but telling my parents was definitely I was trying to avoid it as long as possible. Yeah. And it was definitely a difficult experience, but I understand how they got to their understandings, and I respect them for their beliefs. And the only ask I had of them throughout the process was, you just respect my life, right? And tolerate it to a point where it's just on a human level, you're giving us respect. I don't need you to be in the gay club with me. Like, I don't need you to have a rainbow wig. Like, I don't need it, but I do need you to recognize us as human beings and keep it at that. And so it took some time, but by the grace, nothing but the grace, my parents are in that space now, and we can have a more open dialogue and discussion, and we've been able to heal as a family. But certainly it is not for the faint of heart, and I feel really blessed. Even though it was a tumultuous time for us, I feel really blessed because there's so many queer people, queer Africans around the world that are unsafe, that don't have a family support, that don't have a way back to redemption or to wholeness. So I certainly am grateful for our experience, despite how difficult it was. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, thank you for your vulnerability, and sharing that. And also you bring up the importance of empathy and speaking on the aspect of it. And, I feel like, as you say, like I'm sure a lot of people just globally who can relate to your experience. And so to be able to hear that perspective, is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And I couldn't have made it through that experience without how she handled it. Because just really put it in perspective. Like, I'm battling with my family about our relationship, but she has to, you think the family you're trying to go into, you want them to be welcoming, right? Her family is very much super open. And when they welcomed me into their family with open arms. And so she didn't get the same experience that I got. Yeah. And so that sucks. And there have been relationships that ended because of that, because the families didn't get along. And her persistence, her handling of that situation is a big piece of why we were able to make it through it. And I just, it was no joke. And I can't imagine being on the other side of receiving all that vitriol and not be your family.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience because, like she said, my family is more open. And anyone I've ever brought home, they've always welcomed them with open arms. So to have the opposite happen was definitely a shocker, to say the least. Right. And just like the process of working through it, like she said, we're in a good place now, but it definitely took some years to get into that good place.
Man, so now you talk about, you guys met in DC, and then from there, your career took you to China.
It was, we were there for about 3 years, both teaching.
You both were in China.
Well, both of us were, so from like 2014 to 2017, we're in DC teaching. Okay. Finish TFA, stay in the classroom, still working. By that third year, I know that she's like, I'm over this. And for me, I think
over DC or over America?
Oh, no,
over teaching.
I planned to be in the classroom for a long time. Like, I never thought, I'm going to be like that lifetime teacher. I wanted to teach so that I could like get a hands-on experience and really understand the education landscape. Because I always knew, like, even before going into the classroom, that I wanted to be able to impact the classroom environment. Like, I want to be able to impact schools, not from like, I guess, like a ground level, but from a more systematic level. But I felt like from what I was reading and just like common sense, like you want to know what's actually happening before you start making recommendations and telling people how to do something. So I knew I would do teaching for like maybe a couple of years. So by the time that third year rolled around, it was like, this is going to be the last year. And of course, the burnout was also real. But like, I definitely intended to only be in there for a shorter period of time.
When you were teaching, were you teaching public schools also?
Yeah, public charter.
Oh, charter school in DC. Got you.
Wait, so with the charter schools, DC has a reputation.
Sure
Let
do.
me just say that first.
We love you, DC though.
And then was there like a difference in the students from the charter school versus, you know, the public schools? 'Cause I know TFA is for like low income or kind of areas, you know. I know. So I went to school in Baltimore County. So, and it was, again, the county.
Yeah.
But still, teachers caught hands.
Oh, man.
So,
unfortunately, I did too.
Oh.
And from little kids, like 5-year-olds throwing hands.
Yeah. It was fun seeing a grown man get knocked out by a kid.
Oh
I'm like,
my God.
hey.
And that's really
traumatic.
I don't know if it's the media doing this, but it's been really unnerving to just see the violence against teachers just being videotaped. Like, I think that's also a weird thing. Like, it's hard to see like the stories of the teacher's leg got broken and people getting knocked out and just people walking out, people getting shot by a 6-year-old. Like wild things happening in the classroom. And unfortunately, I did see some wild stuff while I was down in DC. So it was wild, but I'm really glad no one had their phone out because that just wouldn't be good for nobody. But
viral.
Viral every week. Every week. It was just wild. It was a wild 3 years. And for me, I was like, every school was just a walking fire. Like in the conversation of education, some of the arguments against why teach is why recruit teachers into burning school buildings is the idea. Because a lot of the schools, unfortunately, in DC that I experienced and saw were burning. And it was really hard to experience that as a teacher and to see that impact the kids. And so for me, by the third year, I was also burnt out, but also Trump had gotten elected, and being in DC at that time was really difficult. Like, it was a rough time to kind of think about, where is this country going? Like, to come off of Obama and them years, which, okay, whatever, you can say what you want to say, but it wasn't them Trump years. So I feel like there was a real shift that I was like, maybe I should just exit stage left. So I started thinking about, what is my transition? She's going to grad school. Where do I want to go? And ended up kind of coming across the Princeton Asia Fellowship, which took me to China.
You know, you talk about you talk about the country, especially during that time with Trump, and you're seeing all these things happen with the schools. And Toby and I, before y'all came, we were talking about the economy, and there's we didn't talk about this part, which is that there's a conversation around China and like China becoming, I guess, you know, more of a superpower than they are now. And even potentially the Chinese currency being eventually potentially like taking over the US. That's like the global reserve currency, which, you know, may not happen, but it's just like even the fact that that is in play. So I'm very curious.
Russia right now, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Because I saw that Russia is using the yuan to pay off some of their debt.
Yeah.
And that's major because no country has always been the USD. Just that one big, huge nation that is now transitioning. Yeah.
And even seeing Russia and China, the partnership that they're sort of forging. Are you seeing
gang?
I saw a meme the other day of like
dapping it up just the other week. Xi Jinping and his buddy boys, they was really dapping it up. It's certainly eerie. It's eerie. And I will say this. I think that as coming from the Western perspective, we've always had the US as the pinnacle, right? The hegemon of the world, right? And for the first time in a really long time, it's shifting. And I think while unfortunately shifting to places that we may not like as a society, to maybe not great places, I'm not mad that it's shifting, but I'm not happy with the direction, because I think it's like, why does the US have to be the one in the control, the one in the driver's seat, right? And when I think about Africa as a continent, how has Africa benefited with the U.S. being in the driver's seat, right? And so this shifting of geopolitics that's happening.
I mean, but like
yes, I know,
China,
I know, it's not. That's like I said, it's not shifting. I'm not loving in the direction it's shifting in. I'm okay with the fact that it's shifting.
A lot of
I don't like it.
Africa, and
I don't like it. We basically got there right after One Belt One Road kind of took off in 2015. So we kind of were in that space where we got to see China-African relations really like develop pre-pandemic, right? And it was a really magical place. Like at that time, I think
in China, while you
in China, right? That's the craziest part. I couldn't tell you. People till this day don't believe me. Living in Beijing, it felt like one of the most cosmopolitan places in the world. You go to the barbershop, the China to Zimbabwe ambassador is getting a fade right next to you, right? Like you're hanging out with people that are making global decisions. And it's one of those places where it brings together every type of person that in a different society, in an American society, you would not be walking in these rooms with these people, right? And so it was just very a mixed place of almost a Pan-African dream where almost every African country was represented while in Beijing, where you're meeting students because of the One Belt One Road. They're aggressively bringing African students to come study and for largely free. So everyone's there. Everyone's there. Angolans, Nigerians, we're in Cote d'Ivoire. Everybody's represented. And for me, I've never been in a room with that many Africans in one place.
I never thought that like people were going to China to go to school.
Right.
But the amount of like Arubans, like Bahamians, that were there, I was like, wow, that's crazy to think that people travel to China, like kids travel to China to go to undergrad. And then they take that degree back home and do, I guess, whatever with it. Like, I've never met an American student that's been like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to school in China, unless it's like Tsinghua, like this was one of like the best universities, which is probably hard for an American to get in there. Anyway. But yeah, that was amazing to me to see so many people that were Black but weren't American.
But there also were a lot of diasporic Black people, like people out of Atlanta, Houston, like it was everyone in that place for that very specific piece of time prior to COVID. It was actually quite magical to be able to experience that. And I largely credit China for just really solidifying me in my African identity, because I just was super exposed. And
that's
it was
very
really
interesting. It's it's interesting everything you're saying. I was just talking to my our other partner Sekou, and we're talking about what we're talking about with the world state of the U.S. especially, and I sent him a clip of the Kenyan president saying that he had said something a few days ago that kind of went viral and about all those people getting out of U.S. dollars, because he's like, the market's going to be changing very soon. And I sent that to Sekou, and he was like, well, we better start learning Chinese.
But ain't no lie.
And it was like, he was half kidding, but it was also like, I think about how a lot of our families came to the U.S., right? And then ended up raising children in the U.S. And that was something that was foreign if you were from, you're from Nigeria or Africa, or wherever you're from. And it's like, in my head, I don't envision this, but it's like, it makes me think about, like, you're talking about people going to undergrad in China, or just what the environment was like in China. It makes me think about the reality of, like, if, let's say, China is that place where people are going to.
That's not going to happen.
I think the pandemic might have killed that.
I think, like,
so why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I think with China and their borders, it's like, they're pretty closed, like, right now. And like she mentioned, the pandemic did impact that a lot, because they like pretty much had a zero COVID policy. So there were a lot of restrictions. But I think even still, unlike America, where like that whole melding pot thing is really big, like you want all of these diverse cultures, I don't believe China is like that. I think that they want people to come to do very specific things, like very specific tasks. They're not trying to create this new America, this new melding pot. They're like, this is China, this is the way we do things, and we can outsource some things, and you can come stay for a while to do things like business or teach children English, like those like really specific things. But having like a bunch of people just come, like I don't
a free for all. No,
so it was like it felt very. Do you feel like it's like more like transactional?
Oh, for sure,
for sure. Everything is in service of what the CCP believes is their top priorities, and if you're not aligned,
CCP,
the Chinese Communist Party. If you're not aligned with the things that they're looking to do, then you're not there, essentially. So it is very a transactional place. And I think that it is good for some, but not for all, right? It's not, it can be it can change the dynamics of how people socialize. I would almost liken it to LA, where it's like everyone's there for something, everyone wants something. And so that's the vibe.
The one thing about China is that like, everything.
Did you say LA?
It's like I likened it to LA.
Oh, okay.
We compare it to DC.
Say that.
I love DC, but it can be a little bit like, what are you doing? But LA's worse. Like LA's much worse. Sorry, LA.
Never been to LA. So.
Yeah, they did
LA a couple times, but
everyone's trying to make it right. So it's that because the entertainment industry largely is the center. Everyone's there trying to figure their stuff out. So it's like, if I meet you, it's not just, hey, what you doing? It's, what are you doing? How can we collab? What are you doing? How can we benefit each other? So it's that kind of.
But I think the interesting thing is, I think most foreigners going to a new place is doing it for some sort of transactional reason. Like I can't think of many people
or transformational.
Transformation.
I think some people. I can't
think of many people that are just going to a new country and just like, I'm just eat, pray, loving it, or just staying here for a certain amount of time. I think everyone is really upfront about what they're in China for, because I don't think that anyone goes. Well, not anyone. I think most people that I met there had a timeline, like, oh, I'm going to be here for this amount of time, this amount of years. So they're trying to get something done in that time.
I think for me, my theory was, you're either going for some transactional purpose. I need to build this part of my business and get something out of it. Or you're going just to transport yourself. I want to live in a different place, period. Or you're trying to transform yourself. Oh, I'm pivoting. I got divorced or something and I want to be someone different, right? I think largely it fits in those three buckets for me of why people are going to some other place. And I think all of those reasons are valid. It's just about, what works for you, and for sure China is not right. Or you're talking
because I didn't for the life figure out why she wanted to go to China.
I could not figure it out.
I was happy about
no, she wasn't. She wasn't, because China's not for everyone. It is not the easiest place to live and to thrive. It is certainly, it's a very much different environment, different customs, different language, different everything, and so it is quite the adjustment.
So now, when you went, were you not messing with it?
No.
Or how did you feel?
She tested the water. You came for like a couple months over her break or something just to test it out.
And after grad school, New York in grad school was a lot. Like I love living in Brooklyn, but like taking the train all the way to Harlem every day to like multiple times a week to get to class, that wasn't fun. And being broke in grad school, that was not fun. Like especially in New York, like you think, when you move to New York, it's gonna be so fun. Like of course you're gonna have to work hard, but like no, I was a broke grad student and it was tough. So I was like, I need to get out of here as quick as I can. So I just did my program straight through and did it in a year and a half. And after that, I was like, okay, well, I have this extra time before graduation. Let me go over there with her because she had an apartment. And so, I went over there for about 5 months. It was like from January to May or June-ish, when I had graduation. And those months were rough. Like
it was rough for me too, because I'm like, you're living there and you know why you're there, but the person's coming, and so it's a lot of pressure for someone to move for you. And I wasn't really with the idea, but it's like I want her next to me though, so I had to figure out like, how do I make China lit? And it was not successful. So I tried so hard. hard, but it's just like it wasn't a fit for her, and it barely was a fit for me. So I think it was hard to try and make it work, and I had to stop feeling bad that she didn't like it.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time because when I went over there, I think we were also living in a bit of a fantasy. Like,
Yeah,
I finished grad school, and like I said, like I was broke.
Yeah.
And she was like, come, I got it. Like, you know, my job pays for my apartment. We're going to live off my salary. We're going to make it
in
work.
renminbi.
Right.
Renminbi.
So I get there, it's probably like
Yeah.
a month and a half, maybe a month and a half. That might have been longer.
Had to get a job.
We're looking at the
Yeah.
coffers like,
Oh, man. What's the renminbi versus dollar?
At
Oh,
the
that's
time,
the
7
time.
to 8.
Okay.
It was about 7 to
like
10.
six-ish. Because
You
we go
know-
until 7 until near because I
Yeah,
know because I was
6
always
to 7
Okay.
renminbi to
converting
$1
money. Yeah.
Got you. Got
So
at the time.
yeah, we go through, and it's like I can't say like I like to live a good life. I like to go out to eat. I like to hang out. I like to have a good
You
time.
do, she low key.
No, like I like to go out, and I can't say I enjoy spending money, but I enjoy doing the things that require money.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, right,
know?
right.
Yeah, we get there, and it's like a month in. It's like, hey, you gotta get a job.
I know.
It's already a tense situation.
Talk about bursting someone's bubble.
Yes.
Oh.
And
Yes,
we're already in a
sure.
tense situation.
She
so
thought
it's
she was
like,
on vacay.
I did. I
Now
just
she
had
on the
this-
clock.
I'm like, I just got out of grad school. She got it. I'm just, figure out what I want to do next. Figure out what my
Right,
next
right.
move is.
Yeah.
No, that was very much so
Short lived.
Yeah.
It was
And
a brief break.
brief break. I ended up getting a job there and working with students, and that helped me to see like some more of the culture because most of the students I was working with were Chinese.
Yeah.
And yeah, just getting to know the culture and the people, and it was like. So she paints this very, wonderful diasporic experience. I can't say I had that.
Oh, you missing out.
Yeah, I can't say I had
It's
that.
all about who drives the narrative.
Right. And I think maybe it's because she was there for longer.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that like
I had a more of a community by the
Yeah.
time she got there because I was there for 2 years
Two
prior
years,
to her
2 years,
coming.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
the thing is like Chika isn't actually that social. So I think this was actually the funniest part. I'm listening from back home, like she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going out here, I'm going out there, I'm building this network, I'm building this business, I'm out and about, I'm socializing." I get there, we're barely going out. It's like, every now, like, where are these people that you were talking about? Like, I did meet like one of her best friends, and she was around a lot. And shout out to Maria, she's amazing. But I'm like, this is not what you were saying was happening. over here.
Because for an introvert, going out once every month is we lit, we live, right? But she is not an introvert, so she
No.
want to go
So
out
I'm having
a
to
couple
make my
times.
own way. I'm having to make
We
my
will.
own way with my own people, and that was
I'm
difficult.
like, you're doing too much.
Because I would say that a lot of people were very cliquey, and not in a mean way. I
Yeah.
wouldn't even say cliquey, territorial. I think that it's like when you meet people, you can feel them like holding on to their friends, like like when you're trying to talk, and so you can just you can feel like someone's like, oh, that's my friend. Like,
Yeah.
back
A
up.
lot of that.
This is mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's because there are not that many people,
Yeah.
and so I think that people get a little bit more territorial because time split there. Like, not everyone live close together. Some
Yeah.
people live further out, and so when you do get to see your friends, I'm like you want to see them.
Mhm.
I'm guessing, and there weren't that many. Like there was a good community, but I wouldn't say that there was like an abundance of Black people or an abundance of like super cool people
Yeah.
in China. That wasn't.
I think that to put it in perspective, like in a city of almost 22 to 23 million people, there might have been 100,000 expats. Like
Yeah.
there aren't that. There are a lot, but not a lot compared to the actual population. So us meeting people, certainly you meet people, but the expat is largely a bubble, right? In the bubble, and people are trying to protect their network, because when you move to a new country and you're by yourself, like we were, you don't have your support network, no family, no, you're 10,000 miles away, 12-hour time difference, like you're literally isolated in a way. So people are trying to find a semblance of community, and largely that issue was a large reason why I started the business I did, because I was trying to figure out how do we bridge this gap of people not being able to find the communities that help them feel like they belong in a place that they're not from.
Yeah. So my next question, which I'm glad you just brought that up, because I wanted to ask you about what's good Beijing, right? Before you get into that, how you always just said how large Beijing is. That was also another point. You just like reading my mind. Did you have a chance to travel to other places in China during that, like Hong Kong or?
Hong Kong's one of my. I definitely wish I would have gone.
Yeah.
Now is definitely not the same, but
because how large is China as a country? You know,
surface area wise, I don't know.
People.
I mean, it spans like 6 time zones. So, like, just to keep it in perspective, like in many different climates, like it's a really, really, really big place. I think over 50 provinces.
Because I don't know all that much about China other than what I see in the media, and I don't know if it's like when people ask about Africa, they're like, oh,
it is.
How's Africa like?
I will say that. I will say it's similar, like because it's so different that where you live in Beijing versus where you live maybe in Guangzhou down south, completely different climates, right? Yeah. Completely, it's sunny and like the beach, right? And it's very cold in like the icy tundra in Beijing. Like the environment's different, the culture is different, the language and dialects are different everywhere you go. There are a lot of different ethnicities within China. There's a very large Muslim population within China, which impacts the culinary landscape. Personally, the best food, but it is a very diverse place, and so the Chinese that we see, largely the Han ethnicity, is the largest, but there are so many other different places. I went to a few. A bit of traveling. I wish I did more, but I think when I started my business, it was kind of tunnel vision, and I ended up staying largely in Beijing. But Shanghai, I think I've been to Hangzhou, Suzhou. I never made it out to Chengdu. Sichuan province is the one place I really wanted to go because it's like the place for spicy food. So it's definitely a place with really good cuisine. I know that Africans are settling in a lot of different places in China. They tier their cities. Yeah. So tier 1 cities are the larger, more cosmopolitan cities, and then the tier 2 are like kind of the mid, and then it goes down from there. So you could go, for example, at Beijing.
Else is like the hood.
No, I ain't say nothing. But like tier 1 would be Beijing, but then like 30 minutes away from Beijing by train is Tianjin, which is a tier 2 city. It's smaller, but it's like over 13 million people in that city, like huge. Still huge. Like tier 2 city, still like bigger than most American cities, like bigger than Philly, like. And so it's definitely a wonderful place to travel because you see a lot of different cultures within the same country. And one thing I do love about the local culture is that Chinese people love to tour their own country. They do so much traveling within their own country just by choice, just to enjoy it. And it almost inspired me because I'm like, wow, I haven't been to many states in the US. And coming back here, I'm like, oh, I really want to travel to more states. I want to go to smaller towns. I want to go to the places that maybe people are like thinking is not really cool to go, but they value every part of their country, and they love to see it, and learn the history of all the different places. So I wish I traveled more, but business was calling, so we did that.
So what's good Beijing?
What's good?
So to tell us about it.
So about like 6 months into being in China, like when you move to a different place anywhere, you're going by yourself. You're like, what do I do? I spent I think the first 6 months in isolation because I just was like stressed. You're away from your family, your loved ones. You don't know the language as well. Like I was still trying to get my Chinese back at the time. Like I just didn't want to go outside. So I spent a lot of time inside just trying to create an environment in my home that was calm. And then after a couple months, I was like, okay, I think it's time to go outside. And at that point, I didn't really know where to go, like what to do. I went to work, but that was kind of it. And so I started kind of researching, trying to find events because I figured that's the best way to go meet people and do things. And I found myself doing a lot of research to go to these events. So I'm going and finding them. And I'm a great researcher, so shout out Google. And I was really, that's not in China, but shout out Baidu. But I was really searching for things to do, and WeChat specifically, that's the app over there. And so I went to these events and would talk about them. People be like, how did you find that? Like, oh, how did you go? You look like you had a good time, or da da da. And I'm like, So then around that time, Black Panther was coming out, and Black Panther was so excited. So we were gonna do. They were doing. I actually saw Black Panther in Africa, in Kenya first, but then when I went back to China, it finally made it to China because everything's delayed release. So in Beijing, all the Black people wanted to put on this amazing like event for Black Panther in Beijing. So I ended up going, and I was in the chats and people were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that there was this event and there's hundreds of people going. It's all like photographers and it's like a big red carpet moment. And I was just confused on how so many people didn't know about these events. So I think the issue was, how are people getting information about things to do here in the city? Because my idea was like, if you don't know, you won't go. So how do you get the information in people's hands so that they can make a choice to go to places that create community for them, that help them find where they belong in a place that is not familiar, like very not familiar. And so most people, expats in China, don't speak Chinese. And so navigating is extra difficult. Finding information is extra difficult. In China, things aren't like in Google, everything is searchable on a search engine. In China, it's not that way. Information is not easily accessible. There's no Eventbrite. There's no amalgamations of information that is easily accessible for you to figure out what's happening. It's by almost word of mouth or like serendipity. So basically, I was trying to solve for that. And so I put in the chat, like, oh, y'all want me to work on some platform or whatever to help you all know about events? And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, bet. And then we started. So we ended up doing publishing a digital magazine. So we would promote about 250 events a week across several different, so tech, business, arts, music, any and everything pretty much was in that magazine. And in China versus the US, everything's largely visual QR code based. That kind of now is happening here, but it was always happening there when we were there. QR code
in general, did you notice that they were ahead in technology?
100%. I think they had 800 million Chinese people out of the billion had a mobile device. Because of WeChat. Because they had the app is an all-in-one app. You can pay your phone bill on the app, send money on the app, text friends on the app. It's kind of all the things. So everyone had a phone. So everything was very technological based. No one had cash. So largely it became a cashless society. I'm teaching 5-year-olds in China. They don't know what money is. They don't know what the cash is because everything is digital. And I remember coming home for vacation and being like, wait, you need a card? I was like, whoa, like I feel like I went back to the past. And now everyone's Apple Pay. Like it was that vibe. So so we did a lot of promoting of events and then eventually started putting on our own events to kind of fill gaps. And then we also did consulting for small businesses and medium-sized businesses on their events of how to just create more community spaces for people. And we had a lot of great success. We had, people that were able to find communities that they otherwise would have never found because we did a lot of the brunt work of curating opportunities for people. And that helped make their expat in China experience feel more like home. And it really was focused more so about being an inclusive platform for Black people. There were a lot of Black people at that time. And because of the China and African relations booming at that time, Africans were having a lot of amazing events that no one knew about and no one maybe wasn't aware of. And so we really focused mostly on that. And then it kind of branched out to all their communities.
Got you. Wow, that sounds like an amazing platform. And that was another question, like what was it catered to all expats, but it sounds like it was catered specifically to Black people.
It started with it focusing on just making sure our events were at the forefront, and that was really amazing because it helped bring people into the fold and help them engage with our conversations, our discussions, our things. And then it kind of grew to the larger expat and then the local Chinese community. Like Chinese people were coming to events to meet foreigners and to experience different things to broaden their views. And so it ended up being kind of a everybody thing, but FUBU for real always is where it starts.
Shout out to you for that. And so now so you came back to the States from China. And is What's Good Beijing still
No, we're not anymore. But largely, I think that people were still in the groups.
Right,
The
right.
groups
The
still
commu- the
exist. So now
communities
it's
are
like a self-running
that's
thing.
cool.
But
That's
yeah.
cool. And so now, when you came back, you came back to DC or Philly?
No, we came to Philly because
Okay.
because the pandemic happened, and then
that's
we
what
got
that's why.
separated essentially for about a year.
Okay.
Because I was finishing up my contract in China. She was in Philly, so then I just came to Philly, and that's how we ended up settling here.
So now, bringing the conversation to the present day, I know that you work in education advocacy and you were education consulting.
Yeah.
Well, what does that look like for you guys? I know also, 'cause we spoke briefly before the talk, you guys actually leaving Philly soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually bittersweet about it because I really have seen Philly's become my home for sure. Like, sorry, Columbus, but I am claiming Philly. I really do love being here and have really built a really beautiful community and family being here. So I think it's going to be sad to leave for sure.
Yeah, but post China, like I still was able to work the job that I worked in China because the company that I worked for was basically Americans, and they ran a company helping Chinese students get into American universities. And so when the pandemic hit, they too were impacted and needed to move back to the States because they were American. And so our company went completely remote. And so my job is all remote, and I still do the same job I've been doing for like the past 3 years.
From China, like
the students that I work with are still, primarily Chinese students, and that's been a whole different experience. Just seeing education from a different perspective, not as much from a deficit perspective.
They rich. They got money.
Chinese kids.
It's been a lot different just to see like what those students have access to and the ways that you're able to help them grow because of some of the opportunities that they have. But yeah, I work completely remotely, and I've done different things with that company. But because I work remotely, we're able to move around, and so. When we came back from China, I wanted to move to Mexico like almost
immediately.
I was like,
you said Mexico?
Yeah,
okay. That's the next stop.
Because I was doing Chinese, but she was learning Spanish.
Yeah. When I was in undergrad, I went to Argentina. I studied abroad there. Had like an amazing time. Speak a little Spanish, and so I was like, I really just want to go to a place and work on my Spanish and like be by the beach. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And she was like, no. That was annoying.
Yes.
So that's next stop.
Next stop, Mexico. Like at the end of April.
Yeah. Yeah.
What city?
Yeah.
Well, so we actually haven't settled on the city. So we're doing like 1 month in Playa del Carmen and then 1 month in Merida, which is like 4 hours east of Playa, driving east. And then we'll choose between the two on the 3rd month, and that's where we'll be.
Yeah. For the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
It's nice having a completely remote job.
Yeah.
That's why we can do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so like when I came back, I definitely was like, okay, the pandemic was crazy. Leaving China was crazy. China during the pandemic was crazy.
Yeah, so crazy.
It was a lot. Like I did like almost a 30 day. It was really 21 days, but it felt like a month of quarantine, like going back and forth. It was just a lot. So I definitely took a good amount of time off and decided to leave the classroom because I definitely wanted to transition to something different, just to expand different skills. And that's kind of how, like, because I had started What's Good Beijing, kind of spent a lot of time in the marketing space, had transitioned into that space, but wanted it to be connected still to education work, and luckily through Google found this amazing organization. We ended up linking up and working together. I've been working ever since to continue increasing the teacher diversity here in Pennsylvania. Like I said earlier, I'd never had a teacher of color, never had a Black teacher in my life, which is crazy. It's so sad for me till this day. So I haven't gone back to grad school. So I'm hoping that when I go to grad school, I'll have a Black teacher at some point, because it really does make a difference. Like we spend a lot of time in our culture talking about the power of representation in movies and TV, right? And the first Black person to win this award, right? And we clap just the same, but I don't know if we speak enough about the need for representation in our classrooms for young students, and just understanding how, not taking for granted the positive impact that has not only on students of color, but on white students as well, benefit from having teachers of color, right? Expanding their minds and and expanding their perspectives and conversations is critical to their academic outcomes and just overall holistic well-being. And so in order to bring more BIPOC people into the classroom, our organization is the Pennsylvania Educators Diversity Consortium. So about over 100 institutions across the state working together to solve the problems that keep Black and Brown teachers out of the classroom, because it's something that certainly we need across Pennsylvania. We have a very diverse population here in the state. About 37% of the students are students of color, but only 6% are teachers of color. And so that is just like and it's even worse in Philly because I think it's 57% of Philly students are students of color. And so there aren't enough teachers that help represent those identities, and that really it causes disconnect between the student and wanting to pay attention. Like for me, I wasn't connected to class as much, largely because I didn't really understand what is education for me, because my teachers didn't inspire it. They didn't affirm my background. They didn't care about where I came from. I learned history that had nothing to do with me. No one celebrated when I brought fufu and soup to the cultural day. Everyone want to eat everybody else's food, and you're acting like my food's disgusting. Those things impact children. And a lot of the things, #therapy, we have things that we carry from childhood into adulthood, and a lot of that can come from our educational experiences. And so it's really shining a light about the importance of really investing and putting people who will truly help guide our children of color to a more affirmed future through education.
Nah, that's what's up. That's what's up. Man, I got two more questions for you guys. This has been a very fruitful conversation.
Yeah, we've been hopping around.
So far.
Yeah, thank you for everyone who's tuned in to Pepper Soup Talk Show. So this is a question that we like to ask all of our guests who come on the show, which is, you're on the One Jollof Pepper Soup Talk Show. So we got to ask you, what country makes the best jollof rice?
I feel like this question, it's one jollof. So what?
Right.
Of course, I'm gonna say Nigerian jollof because that's on my Nigerian. Like,
You're confused. He's like, this one. I thought this was one jollof. Like,
it's like if you ask me, of course I'm gonna shout out my jollof. But I'm not gonna lie, Senegalese jollof crazy. Like Senegalese jollof is crazy. Yeah. Like. The flavor profile different. Ghanaian jollof, shout out to them. It's a different profile, and I really love it. There are so many different kinds. I haven't had Liberian, their version of jollof, but from this pepper soup is given. So shout out to them. But of course, Nigeria's gonna be at the top.
I've only ever had Nigerian jollof, so
yes,
I feel like I'm.
It was a good answer. So, we both not. Toby and I both not.
It's one jollof.
One jollof always. No, you got anything?
Have you guys made jollof? You guys cooking?
We have. Yeah. Toby's actually like kind of a chef.
Oh. Okay. What you cooking?
Anything?
I'm waiting on my invitation. Just let me know.
I'll tell a story. Like one time I went to Toby's place and I walk in, like he was like glued to the TV. With like, what was it that was on? It was like Master Chef.
Oh, I love Master Chef. Yeah. Gordon Ramsay is the homie for sure.
Top Shelf. Like we had a
Next Level Chef. Any Gordon Ramsay show I'm watching. For sure, at all cooking shows.
Not as much anymore, but we went.
What's the one?
Cooking shows had us in a.
Have you seen Pressure Cooker on Netflix?
Pressure Cooker, I think.
Fantastic. They're not paying me, but they should. Because that show is it. It's messy. It's messy, culinary mess. Yeah. But they're cooking amazing food on there. Check it out, Pressure Cooker on Netflix. Yeah. But yeah, we cook. We actually we spend a lot of time because she's also 33% Nigerian.
Shout out to 23.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine in that data, but we definitely we spend a lot of time. Food is our love language, so we spend a lot of time cooking. And I grew up in the kitchen with my mom, of course, watching her cook, and unfortunately cutting onions till I was bawling my eyes out. And making these dishes that we eat today, but I hadn't really perfected them. So in adulthood, I've been spending a lot of time kind of like FaceTiming my mom, like, okay, what do I put in my okra soup?
Like, you can't just like not cook. Like,
no. For me, I was never gonna make it through. I was never gonna make it through life not cooking. I have to know how to make my food. So far, we've increased our repertoire of food.
She's my intro to the food, so I'm like,
Intro Nigerian food.
Yeah,
right,
you make a lot. And maybe I'd upset my mom, but I've left the Igbo tribe and moved into Yoruba food. So I've been heavy in the soup.
That's my favorite.
Okay.
Yes. I am mache soup. Yeah, all of that.
And those are my two favorite dishes.
Yeah. So it's between my mom and then the Nigerian aunties on YouTube have been helping us out.
Was it because you're the youngest that you didn't like have to pick it up as much?
No, I think it was that my mom and dad did a lot of the cooking when they could, and then any other time that we were cooking, largely cooked American food. But I, of course, helped and watched my mom make all of these things, but you just don't have it in great detail, right? So it's like, I know the process of making all these things like puff puff, chin chin, aqua soup, all these things, but knowing the exact ingredients, the nitty gritty, how much, right? And then my mom taught me how to cook, so it's like I can cook, but I think it was really just learning the process. And so between those two things, I've developed my own processes for making all these things, and so as long as it tastes the same in the end. All that matters.
For me, as long as it tastes good, because I have no frame of reference.
Exactly. And it do.
Shout out to all the Nigerian food.
Yes.
The moi moi. And
the moi moi. Yo, my life was making moi moi bags as a child.
I hate it.
Endless.
The foil.
Oh, the foil. But my creases are crazy. Like, I could cut you up with my moi moi bag. Yeah, guess so. Yeah. Bean based,
I had it on Christmas.
And I like my moi moi extra spicy.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't even like beans. Call me about Nigeria. I hate beans. Moi moi is the only thing I'll consume that has beans in it.
So moi moi for akara.
I won't eat akara. I won't eat it.
Oh, really?
No, I don't like it.
I love akara. It gives me an upset stomach.
I don't like it,
but I love it still.
It literally that and gari are the only two things that I'm like. Can't do it. I can't. That's my pounded yam girl, so I can't. Or plantain fufu, like.
I got just like fried moi for the most part.
I know, but I don't know what it is that tastes so different. Like
it tastes better.
It's the bottle of the akara versus moi moi. No, because the moi moi like has like it's savory, like because akara looks like you would like it because it's fried. But I'm a puff puff girl.
Puff girl,
yeah.
I mean, puff puff,
crazy, yeah. And I be
puff puff crazy.
Yeah. Perfected my puff puff at this point, and I be doing it like the aunties be doing it with my hand and just into the oil like whoop. I ain't scared of oil when it comes to catch me fried chicken up like exactly. We're gonna have a potluck one of these. One July potluck.
Sounds like
you heard it here first.
You put that into the calendar. Yeah, well, this is.
Hopefully that's not our car. I don't even know what our car alarm sounds like. Because I told you that day that our car got broken into. Yeah.
What was the outcome of that?
We had to
no outcome. We had to pay.
We just had to pay out of pocket because the deductible is cheaper to just get it done out of pocket than deal with the deductible. But yeah, now
so if your car gets stolen, you just pay the deductible to give you. Like
our window got broken.
It was just the window that was broken.
Car got broken.
They broke the window and got nothing but an iPhone cord.
Got you.
Yeah,
got you.
Brewery Town.
It's gentrifying, I guess. I guess.
The brewery town.
It's like the Brewery Town gentrification is really just like a lot more white people, but
Yeah.
all the black
But
people
still-
still
Yeah.
the struggle is
Yeah.
still there. Just white people.
The
in
next door
breweries.
app, that's what all people are talking about. Just like all of the
Yeah, we be on next door just laughing at all the
Yeah, man.
chaos.
Mhm.
Listen, we've all seen it.
Yeah.
So this has been a great episode.
Yes, thanks
Thank
so
you
much
for
for
having
having
us. It's
us.
so
It was a
fun.
great
Yeah,
convo.
yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah.
Wish you well
Thank
as you
you.
continue your journey.
Mhm.
And it's also just really great hearing your story. I feel like your life's taking you in a lot of different directions,
Mhm.
and it's like it sounds very adventurous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's,
That's what we like.
YOLO.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely. Thank you for having us. And can I have a doggy bag for my Pepe?
Oh yeah. Okay. I guess we good to go.
I'll finish mine after the camera stops.
Choo-choo. Choo-choo.
Well, thank you for everyone who tuned into the
Yes,
Pepper Soup
thank
Talk
you.
Show.
Yes.
We had the brilliant Cierrah and Chika,
Mhm.
and we will catch you guys next time.
Make sure y'all tune in for every episode.
Every episode.